Are managers talent importers or exporters? Are they bringing in folks from other teams and growing them and exporting them off to other teams? Are managers growing their teams and kind of promoting internally within their vertical? What does that dynamic look like? And trying to understand conclusions you can make based on that. You need both importers and exporters within your organization. It's kind of a balance that is necessary to have, but understanding that dynamic and how well managers are working not just vertically within their silo, but horizontally to connect talent with opportunities that they might have available, but also opportunities outside of their team as well.
Brad, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Good. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Whenever I see you, I feel like I need to start reading more.
You know, some of it is a bit of a facade. I don't read nearly as much as I would like to or as I used to, but I try to chip away at my library behind me.
Nice. Well, when I look at that now, because we were just talking about co-pilots before we went live, I'm like, hey, I could just ingest all of that
yes.
into my co-pilot and just ask questions.
Distill it down to a couple of key bullet points.
Yeah. Are you a big reader or podcast, like ebook guy, like audiobook, sorry?
So I don't do audiobooks for whatever reason. I haven't been able to get into audiobooks. I like physical books, being able to turn pages, read. Nice. So thus the library behind me. I do podcasts, but again, that intermediary of audiobooks I haven't been able to stick with for whatever reason.
It's so weird because like for years I struggled I didn't learn how to read until I was like 13. Which was crazy. And everyone's like, hey, Chris has got all these kind of learning difficulties, etc. But the moment I discovered audio and video, I can consume and retain all of that information. Yeah. Whereas when I'm reading a book, I just can't retain it for some reason. And then obviously I learned there's, people learning different ways and they consume content. And that was a game changer for me. I was like, oh my God, I can listen to an audiobook and actually remember most of it. Whereas you're the same with books, right? That's
for books for me, it is, I have similar challenges with you. Retention, what is helpful for me in all of my books, you'll see underlining, writing in margins, and kind of the kinesthetic component of it. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I love when I meet people or like I go to people's houses and I see their bookshelf and it's just full of highlighters.
Yes.
Inside every book is a highlighter in yellow. I was like, I love that. You can learn a lot about people.
Yes.
From the books actually, just in general, if you go through that. But how have you been anyway? How's the family? How's everything?
Good. We've got two little ones. They are keeping my wife and I very busy. Work is also keeping myself busy, but all in all, good.
Good. Well, you're still smiling, so that's that's a good thing. Tell everyone a little bit about your background because you had an unconventional path to where we are today. I think it'd be cool to start there and really talk about how that's also influenced your career and what you do now.
Yeah. So I like many adolescents, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do as a grown up. So at first, kind of my first passion or first thought was to be an architect or some type of engineer. I liked design. I liked some of the mathematical components of it. I went to college undecided, figured let's explore all the options, took an intro to psych class and fell in love with psychology and understanding people, what makes us similar, what makes us different, why do people behave differently or the same in different scenarios. And so went to study psychology, not entirely knowing what career path I was going to make out of it, and ended up falling in love with IO Psych, which led me to HR. And there I kind of found the right balance of the people component of HR and psychology with the mathematical component of analytics, or even just the tech component of people analytics as well. And found the perfect blend, found my sweet spot, and made a career out of it so far from there.
It's kind of interesting because the stars almost aligned for you because this role was probably just coming to age
Yes.
at that point. So you kind of found it at
Yeah.
the moment, if that makes sense.
Yes, I don't think, certainly when I was in high school, I don't think people analytics was a thing.
No.
I had never heard of it. HR analytics, anything of the sort. HR was still very much a compliance, ER, payroll type of function. It has evolved drastically ever since. But you're right, the stars kind of aligned and fell into a career path that I couldn't imagine myself doing anything
Yeah.
else.
Sometimes it's meant to be.
Yeah.
This job for me was supposed to be a summer job when I was 17. I'm still here 20 years later, right? And I still have to explain to my friends and family what I do. They're like, "What do you do for a living?" So you don't work in HR, but you do HR? I was like, "Yeah, that's what we do." But yeah, sometimes I think like you're right. When you're that young, it's just kind of no one can be expected to really understand what they want, right?
Yes.
It's kind of you kind of have to taste different things and try different
Yep.
things, and then you kind of figure it out that way. There's no, I think we've all got hundreds of friends that went to uni who just have jobs that have nothing to do with what they studied.
Oh,
Like
yes. I would say most of my friends.
yeah,
Yes.
99% of the people I know that went so it shows you it's important to take risks, take the opportunity to try different things, and you'll find out what resonates
Yes,
with you
exactly.
as well. Um, you've worked in quite a few different capacities though. From that point of HR, from the recruitment side to sort of business transformation, you've worked at companies like Sears, HP, Fannie Mae, etc. What are some of the sort of lessons that you've learned about organizational dynamics in those different settings?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the parallels that I think of is going to different family reunions as an outsider. If you network with folks and attend family reunions, a lot of those families are made up of similar types of personalities. There's a quirky person, there's maybe an intellectual, there's a jock. There's a lot of different individuals, but collectively there's themes and there's a thread of consistency across that family. And I think organizations operate differently. I won't be so extreme to say organizations are like families, but I think there's a lot of parallels in the makeup, and there's a lot of individual differences, but there's a collective theme within that organization. And it's one of those things that has stuck with me of how much culture really penetrates the organization. And I think it's both a give and a take. There's individuals that can shift and change the organizational culture. There's a lot of individuals that come into an organization and self-select right back out because it's not the right fit. It's not what they were looking for. They don't fit in. And so it's kind of this ever evolving organism that, again, going back to the psychology, is fascinating, both from an individual standpoint as well as a collective.
Yeah, never really thought about that before. Like you're right. Like each family has their own culture,
Yeah.
as well, and I never really and organizations are just kind of a larger version,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and within organizations you have those subcultures that
Yes,
also
exactly.
exist, right? I know in my
Yep.
previous company it was like sales had a very different sub sales culture, as it were, to the wider business, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
And there are different dynamics at play, different personalities, different, and you kind of had to understand how to navigate both,
Yep.
like you do in
Yeah.
family.
Yep, exactly. And there's certainly a maybe much more so in organizations, a hierarchy, but I think those exist to some degree in families as well. But there's an informal hierarchy as well, and there's influencers and both in organizations that maybe don't hold a special title, but in families, I think there's influencers that can kind of navigate different sub teams, as you alluded to, that can influence or connect people in ways that you can't otherwise do.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk to someone like yourself who's obviously leading people analytics, and your view on culture from a people analytics lens. When you look at culture from a people analytics lens, what are some of the considerations and things that come to mind?
So I think it's a big question.
I
I
know.
think one of the things that always fascinates me, and maybe it goes back to what we were just talking through, is the role that managers play. I think they play such a critical role in shaping the organization and shaping the culture and, you know, allowing the maybe the right behaviors or the wrong behaviors or the right thoughts penetrate throughout the organization. So those are really, in my opinion, the stewards of the organizational culture. And so that's one of the things that I'm always interested in understanding from a people analytics standpoint, but even broader from an HR standpoint. How do we identify the right people leaders that are going to drive not only the right behavioral components, but the right engagement, the right productivity, drive retention, drive performance, all the things that organizations are looking for? To me, a lot of that comes down to selecting the right and best managers to be stewards of the organizational culture that you want.
Yeah. What does that look like in a practical sense? What are some of the ways that you can do that using people analytics?
Yeah, I think there's, maybe this is overly simplified, but I think it's some of those key metrics that organizations look at, but slice down to team levels or different components of it. So if you look at engagement, if you look at attrition, if you look at diversity, if you look at ENPS, if you just look at experience, I think there's a lot of some of those key metrics that organizations have that can tell how the organization looks at a granular level. One of the things that I absolutely love from a metric standpoint, not good nor bad, is are managers talent importers or exporters? Are they bringing in folks from other teams and growing them and exporting them off to other teams? Are managers growing their teams and kind of promoting internally within their vertical? What does that dynamic look like? And trying to understand what conclusions you can make based on that. You need both importers and exporters within your organization. It's kind of a balance that is necessary to have, but understanding that dynamic and how well managers are working not just vertically within their silo,
Yeah.
but horizontally to connect talent with opportunities that they might have available, but also opportunities outside of their team as
Yeah.
well.
I think that's a great indicator, right? And it's kind of the opposite of what we were taught, early on, right? I know when I was a manager, I didn't want to let any of my talent go,
Yes.
right? Because I was
Yeah.
like, especially in sales, right? I had, specifically these people are generating X revenue, which I get a bonus based on, right? And
Yeah.
and now you want me to export this talent into the rest of the business, and I have to go and find some more, right?
Yeah.
But it only became sort of later in my career where I realized that was actually kind of lying with my own purpose of helping others grow, develop, and succeed. And I kind of received satisfaction for that. But the organization also has to be structured and set up to make that successful.
Yes.
Because if you're incentivized, like I was, to not do it, then
Yep.
why am I going to do that? So you also need
Yeah.
to set up the systems and the structure and the compensation to reflect that.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just
And
running into the wind. Otherwise,
yeah, and reinforce that mindset too, that this isn't your talent, this is our collective talent. And how do we share? How do we put people in the best opportunities for them, grow their career, set them up for success, and think about it not just for me personally as a manager, but for us as an organization. What does success look like? And set up again to your point, the mechanisms, the enablers to be able to do that, but also enforce the right mindset for managers to have.
yeah, and have it literally, it's one of the indicators of how they're measured
Yes.
during their review, right? And I know a lot of companies now are linking that back to the compensation.
Yes.
So it's becoming very real at
Yes.
that
Yeah.
point. I was wondering, like, obviously, I think we could all agree that the pace of change is just exponential right now when we think about technology. I don't think there's ever been a time that I can think of where things are just changing so quickly. How has your approach to people analytics changed over the years, especially with all of these new advancements in technology?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I every single day I try to read something about new technology or something that I don't know. Even with that, I feel light years behind from a knowledge standpoint of everything that's going on. So it feels like an impossible task to keep up with everything. That doesn't stop me, nor should it stop anybody from trying to catch up to everything. But to your question, I think the biggest thing from my vantage point is just the you talked about it in the question, the pace of change and trying to keep up and adapt new technology, but also figuring out what is worth sticking and what's not just going to be a fad, what's actually going to work for your organization, and being thoughtful not to jump onto the flavor of the day, flavor of the week, but being really thoughtful in your tech stack, what's going to work. But also, I think as I think about technology changing, what has shifted the most is really just the the scale and impact that you can have across an organization. From a people analytics standpoint, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, a lot of it was confined to this small group of individuals within a team, or maybe fractions of people's jobs, that would consult on the data, lend insights, and tell people across the organization what was going on. There was no scale to it. Now with technology, you can actually have scale. You can democratize some of the data, some of the insights, give people information to make better decisions. You're not relying on this niche group of data scientists to tell you
In
what you
Excel.
should be paying attention to. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. So I think the scale, the impact is what has changed the most. Who knows, 5 or 10 years from now, what that's going to look like. I think there's always going to be a place for people analytics and the consulting arm of it. But I think more and more you're able to arm decision makers with information a whole lot quicker without an intermediary holding their hand along the way.
Yeah. Along that journey, how long have you been in the space for now?
So I've been with Northwestern Mutual 4 years. I've probably been in HR technology analytics for 15 years now.
Nice. I'm aging you now. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been doing it 20 years, so like it's kind of crazy. I asked you that because I was wondering, like, what are some of the unexpected variables that you've kind of discovered on that journey that maybe surprised you, that you thought, whoa, didn't expect that. I'm just interested to know.
Yeah. I think there's, I struggle answering this question because in hindsight, a lot of things don't seem unexpected. I think you can make sense of a lot of things that jump out to you. Going back to some of the earlier conversation that we had, and hopefully I'm not harping on it too much. I think managers have such an outsized impact in the organization as it relates to performance, retention, engagement of their team. You can look at things like pay. You can look at things like, do you have a hybrid work model? Are you fully remote? You can look at a whole host of other factors. I think the manager influence and the role that leaders have in an organization probably outpaces everything. So I don't know that that's to your question, unexpected or surprising. I think for me, the learning that I've had over the 15 years is maybe the size of the impact
Yeah.
and the significance of it that managers have within an organization.
No, I think everyone agrees with you. I think we all understood the importance, but not to the scale that we understand now, because we have the data, right?
Yes. Yeah.
'Cause-
Yeah.
but back then we kind of was like, yeah, of course this is important, right? You know, this is the person that those direct reports spend their most of their day with, right? So their lives are going to be impacted by that, of course. But I don't think I agree with you. I didn't think we truly, I would have said to the scale that we understand
Yeah.
now as
Well,
well.
and I think the other thing that maybe runs off of that too is just the network that individuals have. I think the more ingrained people are into the organization, meaning, how many close friends do they have, or how many people that can they go and grab coffee with or grab a drink with after work and just talk about their day or talk about their personal life. What does that network look like? I think that influences performance, culture, retention, because the bigger that network is, the more close allies you have at an organization. I think you're going to maximize people's investment in what they want to give to that organization, because they see it not just as an organization, they see it as the collection of people that are there. And so I think that really influences things, which is one of the things that a lot of organizations struggled with during the pandemic. Is some of those networks, people were joining organizations that were fully remote, trying to establish new networks that were challenging. And we found a lot of ways to work through that, but the sudden shift made that very challenging. And I think I think there's a lot of reasons why we saw the Great Resignation happen, but I think that was one. Is it kind of weakened some of the ties that people
Yeah.
had to their organization and the network that was there.
Yeah, the network is kind of like the glue that holds it all together, right? And you just didn't have that when people were being
Yeah.
onboarded by the thousands virtually, and they only see one person. The only interaction they have with the entire company is their manager. Like
Yeah.
that's it.
Yep.
That's all they have, right? And when I was at my last company for 10 years, and I would get recruiters trying to headhunt me every year and call me. And when I look back of like, why did I stay? It was because of all of those relationships that I
Yep.
had throughout the entire company, right? Not even just my own team. And I was like, and I enjoyed it, right? And I had all these people. Like, I stayed more for those than my own personal development,
Yeah. Yep.
in a weird way. And when I did leave that, and I had a year gap before I started HR Leaders, I went to another company, and I realized just how important that was, because all of a sudden I felt like I just landed on a desert island, and
Yep.
in order for me to make change, I had to start that all over again, in terms of building new relationships, building the trust again, getting to understand the business. And I was like, oh wow, okay, I'm back here again. And in order for me to make meaningful change, it's probably going to take me a year just to even establish relationships, trust, credibility, and
Yep.
build my own network. And I was like, okay, it's a big eye opener.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not always just about the pay increase or the new job title. It's actually those other factors that are most important as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, it's interesting. Um,
Yeah, I've changed jobs 4 or 5 times, or changed organizations 4 or 5 times, and have had the exact same experience. The hardest part is leaving that network.
yes.
A lot of them you can stay connected to, which I always advise people to, keep your network close. But that is also the compelling reason for me to stay at organizations, and it's always one of those experiences that I forget in the first 6 months of a new role, how hard that is to
Yeah.
not have those strong networks and connections and have to build them from the bottom up again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. Like I see it whenever a CHRO joins a new company, and I interview them. They're like, "Hey, Chris, I spent the first year just building the trust, the relationships, and truly understanding the business before I'm making any type of meaningful change."
Yeah.
As well, because if you try and come in and all of a sudden want to shake things up, it's gonna go very wrong. I think everyone's experienced that one before. Could you share some specific examples of how you're using technology and automation at Northwestern Mutual, and some of the particular things you're doing?
Yeah. So we're similar to a lot of companies in the midst of a multi-year journey here in understanding not just our current landscape, but all the potential that
Hmm.
exists out there. And we're certainly not starting today or yesterday. This has been kind of in the background and been works in progress for a while. But I think the biggest opportunities for us and where we're hoping to make the biggest strides is really how do we operate more efficiently as an HR organization? How do we make it easier for the population outside of HR at Northwestern Mutual to engage with us, to get answers that they need, to understand policy questions or get resources that they need from us in a much more natural way, which allows HR to spend our time on higher value work, on greater impact, and some of the more transactional, tactical, mundane things can be automated through technology. So I think that's one of the big shifts that we're leaning into. The other one near and dear to my heart, and I alluded to it earlier, is I always cringe a little bit when I say data democratization because I think it's an overused term, but I think a lot of it is how do we give data, insights, analytics to decision makers outside of HR and give them the autonomy and empowerment to make decisions that they need to in regards to their talent and understanding what their future needs are, giving them the right tools and insights to be able to do that. And again, a lot of that requires not just spinning up a dashboard and throwing it at people leaders and saying, here you go, make the most of it, but coaching them through. And there's a big change component of how to use it, what you should be looking for, what actions you might be thinking about as you look at certain trends and what to do with it, how to monitor progress. And so I think that's the other big opportunity from our lens within HR of how to really unlock and unleash technology to make us better as an organization.
Yeah, no, I love that. I feel like we've always been on this constant quest to be able to free up the time, like you mentioned, for some of those mundane sort of admin tasks, but also create a better to free you up to have to offer more strategic work, right?
Yeah.
And that can actually also mean freeing you up to have meaningful conversations.
Yes.
Too, which is the human part that we're not trying to
Yes.
replace with the technology. Actually, that frees us up to be more human and have
Yes.
more value. So I think a bit of a misconception sometimes on that side, and as you said, on the other side, we kind of need to give our managers and leaders all the help we can. So giving the data that they need, just specific to them as
Yep.
well, right? Not just
Yes.
here's all this data, and that's the challenge. But again, with technology, we can now do that at scale. And
Yep.
Chris, here's an overview of your own team, for example, what that looks like. That's those are two super important things that you said that are going to help both the employees but the organization win as well, and they both go hand in hand.
Yep.
What does that look like in today's world where you are in terms of, if we talk specifically about the dashboards and getting the data in front of those leaders, and where are you aiming towards in the future?
Yeah. So I would say, if I were to ballpark this, we're probably 20% of the way there, maybe even 15%.
So how are you doing it now then? So specifically, how are you doing that now and getting that
So a
data to
lot of
leaders?
the delivery mechanism is we're a Workday shop. A lot of
Okay.
the delivery mechanism is through Workday. The two challenges that we have within my world of people analytics, people outside of HR don't have enough data. People inside of HR have too much data. And so part of it is within HR, how do we distill it down into what's meaningful, what's
Interesting.
impactful, what folks should be looking at, and not just here's a report, here's a PowerPoint presentation, here's a dashboard, and throw stuff at people, but how do we really distill it into what's meaningful? And then outside of HR, I think it's exactly what we talked through. How do we deliver data in a way that fits into people's workflow that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be reminded, what do I search for in order to find this dashboard? Because I'm about to make this decision, or I need the data for X, Y, Z reason. How do we make it a little bit more natural? I think there's a long ways to go there, which is, again, why we're probably a fifth of the way there on our journey. But I think, there's not just a single prong approach. So Workday is kind of our delivery shop right now. What that looks like probably evolves in the next couple of years in terms of really arming people with the right information at the right time in a natural way of the way that they work, so that they can make better decisions.
Yeah. We're seeing that with a lot of solutions now. The ones that are really doing a great job are arming leaders of that data in the flow of work, to your point, right? So it shows up in the flow of work. Like, you shouldn't have to go off in a different direction to have to go and find that. You've already lost, actually. At that point, if I have to go and search for an intranet and, go and find it, you've already lost me as well. And you look at what we're kind of receiving now from a consumer grade experience. This is not a technology thing. The technology already is there. This is more of a cultural transformational shift than does the technology exist? Because we've been doing this for years with our customers and the consumers, right? To be able to do that as well. So I think that's the part that people, they feel like, hey, I'm just going to get this new shiny new tool and it's going to solve everything. Unfortunately, that's not as you just said, right? We've got our technology. We may make some changes, but we're going through this journey, and it's gonna, and we're just at the beginning.
And I think going back to the earlier question of the advancements in technology, I think that is one of the big shifts. Is not just enabling that to happen, but the experience that comes with it. I think that's what has really shifted over the last couple of years, is how do you really make that experience feel natural and seamless for people within an organization, so that it is part of their workflow and not a separate activity. I think that experience is big, and a huge shift that's been underway for the last couple of years.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because you mentioned automating the questions you're getting asked as a HR team from your employee population. We know we can solve that now with things like co-pilots, right? Launching an agent to be able to do that. And I think quite a lot of people are quite familiar with that interface and experience already through things like ChatGPT and Bard and other things as well. So it's people catching up pretty quickly. Like, I think we underestimate
the bar to entry is low.
Yeah. I don't think it's as far away or complicated as possible. It's more like, we discussed this before we hit record, like more of the internal shift and the business being more comfortable with it. The obviously security element, we have to be careful. We have to be careful about people's data. We have to have some level of oversight, all of those things need to be put in place that just didn't even exist. Even legislation is having to be put in place in real time as this evolves so quickly, because the pace is moving so fast and legislation's always been behind, as always, as well, right? So and it's interesting how I'm not sure if you're seeing this, but I'm seeing that HR is actually becoming, in many companies, the custodian of AI. In leading the way. I'm like, wow, didn't expect that.
No, it is. Like I said, I think it's fascinating how AI has really evolved, and I know it's become more and more common terminology to use AI. AI has been around for a while, but ChatGPT has really changed the way that people think or leverage AI. And I think organizations are really, at least the leading organizations, are really seizing the opportunity there and trying to lead with innovation to figure out all the different use cases across the organization, whether it's from a tech standpoint, whether it's from a people standpoint, or any other lens.
Yeah. One of the things I do want to talk about before we wrap up is a lot of this and a myriad of the things that we've been talking about. There's also this lead to burnout that we're seeing from this. So this always on like with technology now, it's like we're always on, right? There's always a Slack message, a LinkedIn message, a Teams message, an email, and it's like people are just becoming overwhelmed, right? This sort of
Yep.
always, so there's kind of like the pros and cons of technology. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that in terms of, what are you seeing, but also what some of your ideas do you think of how we can address that? Because I think it's something that's becoming more and more of a challenge.
Yeah, I think flexibility is key. I think recognizing that, yeah, I forget the old adage, but recognizing that there's a problem is the first step in solving that problem. So I think recognizing that this is how organizations operate, and there's I don't know that that in and of itself is going to change. So how do we shift our behaviors and our mindsets to find the right balance for employees on maintaining that work-life balance? And so again, not to harp too much on it, but I think a lot of this comes down to individual manager employee conversations. What's the right balance? What are the right expectations for those pairings in managing work? And for me personally, I by and large work from my home office here. I think a lot of organizations have most organizations probably have employees that work entirely from home, that have hybrid, that are entirely on site. And so creating kind of tailored flexibility for different types of employees that all have different experiences, that all have different commitments at home, is kind of the foundation of everything. Flexibility looks a little bit different for each organization. For me, I tell my team this, one of the silly quirks that I have, Slack messages. Pet peeve, if any of my peers are listening that aren't aware, the Slack messages that go boom, 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 18 different thoughts all in a separate line that just ping you all at once. I've told my team, like for me mentally, it's a whole lot better to just crunch all your thoughts into a single Slack message, send it at once, wait for a reply. Unless it's urgent, I don't need 15 different Slack messages to come across and, flash on the screen and hit me at once. So I think I use that as an example. I think there's a lot of little things that can go a long way in just letting your network, whether it's your manager, your peers, know what your working style is and have that conversation. And I think it's especially important to calibrate with your manager. What does flexibility mean for you? What are their expectations that they have of you? And making sure that you're constantly aligned so that if you need to step away from your computer and go for a walk for 30 minutes to just disconnect, they're not hitting you up and saying, where are you? I need this done. Why aren't you at your desk? Yeah. You've got the right level of flexibility, the right expectation, and it's not a one size fits all that you can kind of establish a HR policy around. Here's what flexibility means. A lot of it is individualized for specific employees.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it's really important because when we worked in an office environment, there was a level of this is the same for everyone. We go to lunch the same time. we do meetings this way. It was kind of like here's the format, right? Of how. But as soon as we went remote, all of a sudden there's people with kids at home. There's people looking after elderly parents. There's people that just have different schedules, or in your point, just a way in which you want to consume content. Yeah. It's like I am also the same as you, by the way, with the messages, because my team will be like, "What do you mean? I send it to you in Google Chat." I'm like, "But which chat? We've got 7 chats." And I'm like, and sometimes it's really important stuff, and I'm like, "I've just missed it. I've missed it, right?" So I'm with you on that. Just send it one thing to me as well. But what I took away from what you said is just we have to sit down and just be very intentional about creating, because that just won't happen on its own. So and also I think it's on ourselves, our responsibility personally to communicate that. Obviously as managers we can promote that and obviously help, but I think we need to be, and I've certainly not been great at doing this. And my assistant Lisa's actually sitting across from me right now, and she'll tell you I'm the worst culprit of actually communicating how to do that. But we've kind of got there over time of what works best for me. But it's different for everyone as well. And then I can only imagine how complicated that it becomes when you do that at scale in an organization like yours as well. Listen, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, quick fire questions. So first one is like, what are some of the things that you're seeing out there in the marketplace that kind of no one's really talking about, but they really should be speaking more about?
Nobody's talking about, huh? That's a great question. The ones that come to mind are the ones that everybody's talking about: how to use AI, the shift to skills, how to keep an engaged, productive workforce. I think one of the ones that maybe is still talked about, but less so, is I think the power of organizational network analysis and understanding these informal networks or how the organization really operates I would hesitate to say nobody's talking about it. There's a lot of work being done there, and it's, has been underway for a while now, but it feels like that has taken a backseat to all things engagement and skills and AI. And I really believe in the power of understanding how your network and how your organization really operates by leveraging ONA.
You're right. Like a few years ago, it was like a topic of conversation that everyone was talking about, and it directly impacts everything else we just spoke about.
Yeah. Yep.
So you definitely answered that great. That no one's really, we should be talking more about that. I'm glad it's hard to, right? When you've got 1,000 new things that are being thrown at you every day, right? And you're being pulled in different directions. The other thing is looking back on your experience, kind of what do you wish that you had known when you got started that you know now?
I would say, again, harping on maybe a theme here, I think the power of your network. One of the things that I was told early in my career, network. As a bit of an introvert, maybe I'm a fine balance of introversion and extroversion. That scared me. Having to connect with people that were outside of my network and keep ties with them felt scary. I think there's such power in leveraging those relationships, being somebody that's easy to work with and just enjoyable is extremely powerful in your career. It doesn't need to be scary. It doesn't mean you need to go up to strangers and have 30-minute dialogues with them, but really maintaining your network, keeping a board of advisors, personal board of advisors in your Rolodex is the thing that I was told early on I underappreciated. Now looking back, I've leveraged my network for I think every single job except my first one.
There's so many things there, right? Because our first reaction is we don't have time. Yeah. Right. And then, or like, as you said, you're kind of just avoiding it, but then you realize, I don't have time not to network. Mm-hmm. So, and now you kind of, like you mentioned, you see the fact that your last 3 roles have come from that network, or we're talking right now, me and you. Yeah. Right now, because I reached out to you, you replied, and here we are. We've been known each other for quite a few years now, as well. And I will say to anyone listening right now, don't be afraid that if you're going to send someone a message, for example, on LinkedIn, to reach out and they don't reply, don't let that stop you, because I think that's kind of one of the reasons people like this fear of rejection. That if I like try and reach out to someone for a chat and they don't reply, who cares about that? And you'll be surprised the amount of people that actually do reply to you. So I just want to throw that out there as well. Like, I'll share a very quick story and a wrap up. I remember when I was like 18, I messaged Michael Dell from Dell Computers on LinkedIn, a LinkedIn DM. And he replied straight back to me and said, "Hey, Chris, happy to connect you with our CHRO." And I was like, remember saying to Shane, I was like, this guy at the time was like, net worth was like 40 billion. And I was like, the thought that my notification popped up on his phone and he replied to me just made me laugh. Right. Yeah. Like, because how many people actually message him? Probably not a lot, because people are like, he's not going to reply. Like,
Yeah.
I know it's a silly story, but it was one of those eye-opening moments for me that like, wow, I'm like one message removed from anyone in the world.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a kind of crazy thought.
Yeah, I think it's 100% true. And to your point, like, try it. And you might not get a response. I try to be responsive to any message that I get. Oftentimes messages catch me wrong time, wrong place, or I forget, I read it and think I'll respond later. I don't think anybody looks at these messages and says, the audacity that somebody would reach out and want to connect with me on LinkedIn, how terrible of them. So I absolutely agree with you. Give it a shot, connect with people, network. You never know where that's going to lead.
I'm going to give one caveat, and I'll let you go. To all of you vendors, that doesn't mean you can all start messaging Brad.
Yeah. No, thank you for that.
Leading with value led. All right. I always kind of walk into any of those whenever I'm messaging someone through the lens of what value can I add? And I think if you operate from that place, then you're going to have a much better experience. Brad, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you. And I wish you all the best until we next speak. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See you later. Bye-bye.